Hi, Manish. So for our creature that we decided to go with, we decided on a fish that we named the largemouth spindle. For our group, we have Zach, JMO, myself, Nick, and Mark. And this is our presentation. So to start, we decided to put a photo up on the screen as our first slide, mainly because we wanted to show you what we were talking about throughout this presentation. But when it comes to our fish, the proper scientific name of our fish is the Pisces venator. The meaning behind it is fish hunter. We decided on that because we wanted our fish mainly to be a big time apex predator, so we thought it fit. For the habitat, when it came to picking the habitat at the start of all this, we went with the high latitude lakes. We decided on that because we have a few people in our group that are pretty obsessed with fish for some reason. So here we are. When it comes to the lakes in Canada, the temperatures typically range between 0 and 25 degrees Celsius. Obviously, it being Canada being more northern, it's going to get rather cold. The surface of the lakes tends to freeze naturally in the winter months, so it gets rather rough. When it comes to the morphology of the largemouth spindle, the first thing that we started with when designing it were the scales. The scales lining the whole body. It was typically, well, not typically, we decided on that so our fish was defended well, and so it was a gorgeous creature. The males are typically brighter than the females, specifically for the breeding months, because a female's job is to find a mate, and the bigger the male and the more brighter, the better chance it has of finding a female. When it comes to the fish's color, it typically goes from a light blue to a dark green. We decided on this more so just for it to blend into the environment because we wanted this fish to be bright and colorful, but we also didn't want it to be just a standout in the lakes. Both the male and the female have a spindle on the front of them, which ranges from 1 to 2 feet. Obviously, the females being a little bit smaller, but they are both for the same reason. The spindle is there so our fish can either use it to distract a predator from trying to eat it, which would probably be more so the females. And so the creature is able to use it to hunt if it sees fit. When it comes to the actual body of the largemouth spindle, it ranges from 5 to 10 feet. It's a huge fish. We wanted to make it an apex predator, so that's what we did. The males typically are on the bigger end, 7 to 7 feet in length, and the females range from 5 to 7. We went with that length differential because it typically makes sense for fish. So that's what we got.
So for the diadem predator, as Nick said, we wanted this to be an apex predator. When we were thinking about making it, we wanted it to be like something that they would have to make an episode of River Monsters about. So we wanted to eat everything in the Canadian waters, especially we wanted to make it a cannibal too, so it would eat the smaller youth ones to match with the survivorship curve of the fish. The main predator of the largemouth spindle would happen to be humans though, but while they are juveniles, the largemouth spindle has predators that are other largemouth spindles, large birds of prey if they get too close to the surface of the water, and then also fully grown northern pike. Desociology is basically how it lives in colonization. The females of the species, since they are smaller, they do tend to live in schools together so that they can protect the offspring and each other. The males, because they are larger and way more aggressive, they do live in isolation. But once a year, both of them do come together to reproduce. Now, for the defense of the largemouth spindle, they do have very large teeth to fight off any would-be predators. They also have large, dense bones that protect them in fights. And they also live in schools so that the young can remain protected. And then they also for the females.
When it comes to reproduction, as Nick had previously mentioned, the males tend to be a lot larger and a lot more brightly colored. And we kind of went with this because this is how most other fish and other animals reproduce. The females tend to go after the bigger and more brightly colored male to provide the best offspring that they can. Once the female chooses her mate, she'll lay the eggs at the bottom of the lake, and the male will swim over and fertilize them. Both the male and the female will watch over these eggs until they hatch. When it comes to development, once they both hatch, males and females tend to live in the same school, which are led by the female largemouth spindle, and they used to live in these schools for about 2 years. Once they reach sexual maturity, the males tend to go off on their own in isolation to hunt and get larger so they can come back the next year to reproduce. And as far as females go, they'll tend to stay with their school or join another one. When it comes to the respiratory system, we decided to go with what most other fish have, which is just a basic gill system. The water flows in through the mouth and into the gills. Once the water gets inside of the gills filter out oxygen and then expel carbon dioxide. And as you can see on the slides there, that's just the basic way that water is filtered through a fish's gills.
All right, so how it interacts to its environment is fairly similar to most other fish. It's cold-blooded. That way in the winter, its metabolism stays a little lower and it doesn't have to feed as much. They're very aggressive normally, so if they had to kind of keep that up in the winter, it would expend a lot of energy. Has two hearts to increase blood flow. It also breathes a little slower in the winter too, just so it can kind of hunker down in one area. All right, so that's me holding a largemouth spindle. Because of that, main predators include humans. They're delicious, and they have a lot of meat on them just because of their size. Also, because of that, it brings a lot of people to the Canada area just because it is a trophy fish, and Canada already has a very large, it's very attractive to outdoorsmen, so it brings a lot of tourists in.
And our two resources are for the picture of the diagram of the gill system and the lake in the first two slides.